Klonoa Door to Phantomile is a rare example of a perfect game. Playing it when I was very young, it of course had a big impact on me, thanks to its rich, dreamlike world and heart-wrenching twists. Shortly after I first played it at the start of the century, a sequel released. And you'd think I would have been first in line to play through it, but until fairly recently it never happened. I only got a hold of it when I was an adult, and even then didn't beat it. I just kept restarting it every few years, redoing the first couple levels over and over. It wasn't until last year when I finally decided to sit down and play all the way through the sequel to one of my favorite games of all time. And what did I think? Well, the game is amazing. It's another beautifully made, peerless platformer. So, do I regret waiting as long as I did? Well, no, not entirely. First of all, why did I wait so long to play through this follow-up? Well, Klonoa 1 has a fantastic ending. It's not an ending that precludes future titles from existing in my mind. This isn't like a Sly 3 situation where we need to shut Sony down so they can't do any more follow-ups. It's just such a good ending that for a large chunk of my life, I just assumed it was never going to get any better and didn't want to tempt fate. After saving the world of Phantomile with his lifelong best friend Hupao, it's revealed to Klonoa he's not from Phantomile and that he doesn't have a long history with his friend at all. While him and Hupao do form a genuine connection over their adventure, they've actually only known each other a small amount of time. He's a quote-unquote incorruptible dream summoned in as the best bet to face down the nightmare spreader Gadius, and given fake memories to make him think he lives there. Klonoa is a transient in a reality he doesn't belong in, and with his mission accomplished and the world's order rebalancing, he's forced to leave. The world of this title is one we don't belong in. Klonoa is a very dreamlike game. Waterfalls that run backwards, kingdoms in the sky, flying dolphins you can ride on, a feeling of light-hearted whimsy being undermined abruptly by dark imagery, magical rings and crystals, all complemented by a soothing, ethereal soundtrack. And doesn't being Klonoa at the end of the game just reflect that experience of dreaming? When one dreams, it's rare to consciously know that's what's happening. You're in a weird alternate reality that you've only actually been in for a short time, but while you're sleeping, your brain tells you this is your reality, and you've been there your whole life, until you're sucked out at the end and feel stupid for somehow believing for a second that was real. You may have even had a nagging feeling when you were dreaming that something was off. I feel like this again comes across in the atmosphere of Klonoa. The almost ever-present melancholic soundtrack instills a sense of uncertainty in you, like there's lingering darkness and sadness hidden behind the colorful facade of some of these worlds. This ending also reflects the reality of playing single-player adventure games. You boot up the game, and often you're told you have some kind of history in the world, and then you grow to like its inhabitants and save it. But either way, when the game ends, the player has to leave. You don't get to live in the world you've protected. All you can do now is move on to some new world, some new game. To some degree, I internalized that message. The dream was over. And reflecting on it, I had felt satisfied by what I had experienced. This was definitely my train of thought in more recent years. It's harder to remember why as a really young child I wasn't trying to get a hold of the second one. Maybe even then I had internalized the ending's message and didn't just move on from Phantomile, but the series as a whole. Or maybe I was just worried about being emotionally played with again. There was also something kind of nice about not finding out who or what Klonoa exactly was. This incorruptible dream brought from somewhere unknown and then sent away, I didn't really want those answers potentially filled in and being unsatisfying. What was eventually gratifying and relieving about playing Klonoa 2 is that it did about everything I'd want a sequel to Klonoa Door to Phantomile to do. More great gameplay aside, it reflects upon the first title and its message and themes without undermining that original game. It gets off to a great start with the first level. Klonoa is spat out into rain and wind, a bleak stormy ocean smashing against rock formations that are perfect for some platforming. I think this is a very fitting transitionary level between the first game's world of Phantomile and the second's world of Lunatea. This bleak, troubling level is like a chaotic and unstable bridge between worlds. And the music is perfect, mysterious and foreboding, yet giddy and excited for the new adventure to come. Klonoa is saved by two new companions who become his friends as he travels Lunatea, trying to thwart an incoming evil spreading monsters and discord across the land. Each kingdom in Lunatea lives in relative isolation, and they're all associated with an emotion or feeling reflected in their societies. You have the Kingdom of Tranquility, Joy, Discord, and Indecision. One thing I think is so great about this sequel is how it doesn't return to Phantomile. It chucks Klonoa into a world with completely new rules. They don't double back on the brutality of that original ending, where Klonoa gets ejected from what he thought was his home. There's no return cast or locations, and it results in a really cool and appropriate dynamic at the start. This time there's no veil over Klonoa's eyes. From the word go, he is a stranger in a strange world, adrift and lonely. The polar opposite of how 1 started, luring you into a false sense of security. Again, something the first level gets across really well, being this stormy, cold, lonely-looking place, in contrast to the inviting first stage of the original. In the face of all this, Klonoa's determination and fighting spirit comes off even more admirable than before, and the game makes a point of underlining this impressive willpower. Most people aren't going to need an unbreakable will to play Klonoa 2 though, because it's insanely fun, just like the original. The core concept of grabbing enemies to be able to attack or double jump is built upon, but I'd say overall the gameplay is more of an accentuation of the original's rhythms. Puzzles involving the mechanic get more complex and intricate, introducing a few new enemy types with different properties when used. Likewise, action platforming segments that require quick reflexes and good timing become more exciting and frantic. The inclusion of the surfboard stages are a good example of this, as you hurtle along having to think fast. Visually, the game is also quite different. The move to full 3D eliminates the charming contrast of 2D characters on top of 3D backgrounds from Game 1 that evoked a diorama-like quality or an illustration escaping the pages of a fairy tale. But with thick outlines and tasteful use of color, K2 manages to create a striking illustrative look all its own. Plus, the power of the PS2 allows for more extreme jumps and dives that ratchet up the intensity of play. The only place you can argue the title is less impressive than the original is that quality gets a little more thinly spread in what I think is its attempt to be longer. In the original, every level felt unique and the soundtrack never let up in quality. Here, some environments get reused, and while the OST is still great, it feels a little phoned in a few places. The game has it where it counts though, and if you thought the opening areas were good, the lead up to the finale is absolutely mesmerizing. Turns out the spread of evil across the land is coming from the hidden 5th kingdom, the Kingdom of Sorrow, a fittingly downbeat, but no less beautiful area of the game. A wistful sunset coats the level, the absurdist gothic architecture twists and coils like a stomach in knots, with an ever-present bittersweet soundtrack playing. Then we get our final reveals. Klonoa's arrival in Lunatea was orchestrated by the king of the Sorrow Kingdom. The world, refusing to confront their sorrow, shunned this kingdom into obscurity. The king brought Klonoa here to bring him and his kingdom back and pay for this world's sins. The King of Sorrow feels thrown away by the land of Lunatea, resentful, living up to his namesake. I don't think it's a coincidence that the King of Sorrow's character design has a lot in common with the look of Klonoa in the first title, where our protagonist suffered some heavy blows. They both share a lot of characteristics. Klonoa also is kind of a lonely, tragic figure, isolated from others, deprived connections. Something else I like about K2 is that it doesn't go into the specifics of who or what Klonoa is either, and that enhances the tragedy of the character. Even after getting the truth that he wasn't from Phantomile in the first game, it's not made clear here if he has an idea of who he is himself, or why he's the one tasked to travel worlds and save them the way he has, amplifying that tragedy even more. These two are kindred spirits, and while Klonoa stops the king's rampage, he is sympathetic towards him and opts to reawaken the Kingdom of Sorrow, bringing it back to the world. The king passes on as he sees his ambition come to fruition. As our heroes take a breath after their victory, it was weird to feel a shudder come over me. I remember 20 years ago when this exact same situation was undercut by Klonoa being ripped away, and I was weirdly stressed out. And then it became evident that Klonoa is anticipating that happening again too. His new friends are sad to see him go, but Klonoa drops some wisdom, further putting into context why he would bring back the Kingdom of Sorrow. If you don't forget the sadness of this moment, we'll always be together. Sadness and love are two sides of the same coin. The Kingdom of Lunatea seemed lost and self-absorbed without Sorrow, living in isolation from each other. Lunatea's veil, as the king put it. With the Sorrow rebuilt, they can finally come together again. Sorrow is an expression of love, of the desire for something better or someone we miss. Klonoa has of course had a chance to reflect on his sadness for those he misses and has been separated from. His sorrow is a testament to his love. As he hugs his friend goodbye, he even repeats the words of Hupao from the first game. We'll always be together. Hupao said this even though he knew Klonoa and him would eventually be separated, and now Klonoa gets to say it himself in a similar context. It's not just that those two got separated that's sad about the ending of the original Klonoa. It's that Klonoa doesn't want to go. He tries to not get sucked away, desperately clinging on. Even Hupao, who's known this would happen since the beginning, can't just sit and watch and futilely tries to hold on. It's brutal. But here, as the world revs up to remove him, a more mature and worldly Klonoa hugs his friend, sheds a tear, but this time accepts what's about to happen with his mission complete, and confidently walks off with a smile on his face. This time embracing the portal, taking him once again to parts unknown. Embracing the next chapter, instead of trying to prevent it. This ending is a perfect contrast to the ending of the original, and I think it felt weirdly appropriate to finally get to see it, but as an adult so many years later. As a child, the ending of the first game reflected my perspective at the time, wanting playtime to not be over, not wanting to leave the escapism. And the mature, more adult outlook Klonoa has in 2 reflects the person I became. I appreciate the experience and sad it's over, but excited to take the positive feelings it's given me with me to the next chapter of my life and next adventure, wherever that may be. I'm glad I went back to discover my old bud Klonoa ended up doing the same.